Welcome to People in AI, the podcast exploring the forefront of artificial intelligence. I'm your host, Karthik Ramakrishnan, the CEO of Armilla AI. On today's episode, we explore the intersection of innovation, technology, and empathetic leadership with Darren Wilson, a seasoned Chief Product Officer at Soul Machines. Darren brings over 2 decades of experience in leading product design and development across several high-profile companies and innovative projects. Today, he'll share his insights on creating a culture of meaningful innovation, turning groundbreaking ideas into market-ready products, and the importance of fostering career development within dynamic, tech-driven environments. Join us as we dive into the challenges and triumphs of navigating the ever-evolving landscape of emerging technologies. Darren, a pleasure to have you on the podcast today. Thanks for joining us.
And thank you so much. That's such a great introduction. I think I'm gonna steal it and I'm gonna reuse it for my LinkedIn profile.
Absolutely, as you should. You should. So, Darren, before we get started, we'd love to learn about your story and the transition from the various roles you've done in design and product strategy to your current position as Chief Product Officer at Soul Machine. Particularly, if you could emphasize some of the unique challenges, right, in these various waves of technological innovation that you've been through and you've experienced. And it's not as traditional a path as we have seen with others. So, please, over to you. We'd love to learn more about who the real Darren Wilson is.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, we might be a while. Thank you so much. I think, definitely not traditional path to where I am today. And as you mentioned, design background, by trade, I'm a designer. I grew up in London, but it's kind of at the start of sort of the technology boom, kind of, giving you, not aging myself too much, but started working very early in technology on CD-ROMs for the BBC, where they were trying to work out how that they could grasp this kind of changing landscape and use some of their high value brand content to reach new audiences. From there, kind of moved on and worked on a few different businesses, but mainly agency side, and until ultimately starting to work for a company called Fjord, acquired by Accenture. And they were really at the forefront of not just delivering service design or to big businesses on design thinking outside of traditional agency work, but they were really kind of driving towards opportunities in new technology, particularly in mobile at the time. So this was pre-iPhone. So works with the guys at Fjord on, with many telecom companies, helping them understand what they could possibly do with these new platforms and these new opportunities for businesses as they grew up, as they grew up and evolved. And from there, kind of moved with a few of the other guys from Fjord over to work on within Intel in an acquired startup that they had. It was an open source full stack engineering team that were working on initially developing a mobile operating system for some of Intel's newly developed platforms. And from there, kind of collaborated a lot with Nokia and Samsung on kind of multiple phones, trying to compete with the Goliaths of Amazon. Trying to compete with the Goliaths of Apple and Google as the mobile world kind of became what it is today. And then post that, really it got me to where I am today, working with Soul Machines. And the big attraction of Soul Machines was some very interesting tech, kind of this intersection of avatars and AI. That was about 5 or 6 years ago now, and that landscape has really accelerated in the time that I've been there. But kind of, I think back to your previous point, I think the thing about my career that's probably worth noting, and I think this comes from the navigation of those different stages, of those peaks and lows of different technologies throughout as it's evolved, is really coming from a design background and looking for challenges and looking for problems and looking for things to solve and things to define. I'm very much someone who's kind of existed on that kind of storming stage of technology rather than as it becomes normal and kind of predefined. I sort of like the early the beginnings of platforms as they evolve. And as we'll probably get into in terms of conversation, is that I think there's lots of kind of lessons to learn that are quite consistent as you start evolving through those platforms. But yeah, it's been a varied career, and here I am today at Soul Machines, I guess.
Amazing. So why don't we get into it? What is soul machines? Does what do digital souls mean?
So it's good. It's a great name. I think it's one of those things. Mark Sagar, who was one of the original co-founders of the company, he came from special effects background, working for large motion pictures like King Kong and Avatar, and I think with Weta back in the day. His work there was predominantly focused on motion capture of the face and trying to really understand how faces are built and trying to recreate that in film. His research and his career led him towards developing a digital face that's backed up by a digital brain, and I think that's where the soul comes in, right? The notion of having to recreate a digital brain that can operate a digital person that can then react effectively to a real person in a conversation empathically and appropriately to that person's context as well as the conversation. So digging into that a little bit deeper, our avatars are the only interactive avatars on the market today that can see you and can respond to your emotions accordingly and to the emotional beat of the conversation. There's no artificial intelligence in terms of it doesn't know who you are at this point. It can't kind of, the computer vision isn't as sophisticated as some of the things that we're starting to see, particularly this week with OpenAI's recent announcements. But what it does do is it can pick up your behavior and your emotional state. So you smile, it will smile in response to you. You look sad, it will appear concerned, and it can change its behavior and interaction in terms of that, in terms of your context, basically. Do you want me to talk a bit further into kind of like a bit more deeper into the company?
Yeah, like how does it actually how do you bring that to life, right? How do you take algorithms to recreate digital faces and expressions and empathy, really?
So yeah, a lot of research, which I think is I think the background of the business itself was a lot of research engineers who are experts in multiple facets of that, not just in the construction of the face and human behavior, but also in high end kind of CGI technology, and that's kind of where the company's very interesting and quite unique. The merger of kind of the recreation of the reality that you see in cinema to the kind of also that attempt to sculpt and design kind of a digital version of a human face, and that's then customizable, that we can then reskin, and then we can introduce diverse qualities to, as well as different characteristics, different appearances, different clothing, different hairstyles, and the whole gamut of customization. So that's kind of the root, and that was an extremely high-end piece of work. And for the most part, when Soul Machines was first working in the industry and delivering these custom avatars to companies, they would have been completely handmade and hand sculpted and taken 6 to 9 months to create that avatar. The work that we've been doing and that my role has led as part of Soul Machines was the democratization of that technique, or those techniques. So rather than us being a shop that would do these avatars as custom or made to measure for companies, we've transitioned to being less service based and more self-serve. So you can go to Soul Machines today, soulmachines.com today. You can sign up for a free version of Digital DNA Studio. You can build an avatar and you can deploy it under a free account, and you can build that yourself. And that takes the current time from when you've finalized building your avatar to deploying is 30 minutes. That's from 6 to 9 months. So that's really been the work of kind of that democratization of that process, and that's really like the root of kind of what the product team has been focused on up to this point. Now the next stage of that is, now that technology exists, the next stage of that is to try and find some value to customers based on this technology. I think as we discussed previously, the avatar technology is very interesting, and there's a lot of money and investment in that business at the moment, and it's predicted to expand, particularly with the explosion of AI assistants. What's going to be interesting is how a face or the technology that we have can actually add to that technology, and that's what really excites me at the moment. I'd be interested to get your take on this as part of the conversation, but particularly as a lot of the big players in the AI space are not focusing on the face, they're focusing on the voice, and it's a graphical representation of a face. We think there's an opportunity and there's spaces to insert that presentation layer that people can trust, that people can engage with, that people can feel not judged, and that's the suddenly quite interesting area for us to explore, and that's kind of the next few years of Soul Machines.
And that is so cool because I was reading this report, I think sometime last week. There's an explosion in a number of companies that are creating digital companions of girlfriends or boyfriends, and I think character AI is one, and I think there's a number of them that have just blown up over the last few months. Is that something that you think would be where you'd be going? And of course, I mean, I have lots of questions around what does that experience feel like, right? So when you're interacting with an avatar, has there anything that's taken you aback that did not expect this to happen, or something that's taken you by surprise?
So I think yes, quite a few things. A couple of them, the research base that I'm not allowed to talk about, and I probably shouldn't because it might be a little bit scary. So I won't touch on that one. Maybe we can do that offline. But the real surprise for me, I think, is how the advances within the current sort of states of LLMs and particularly the work with ChatGPT. I'll step back. A big problem that we've had in the past was the creation of conversational content that we're dependent on. We're dependent on the NLP companies. You can't compete. We originally, with Soul Machines was created, they did start trying to build their own NLP. They tried to have their own voice technology, and we slowly stripped that down to the most important core part of our technology, which was the face and the brain, and that presentation layer of the conversational content. So we no longer focused on that creation, but the challenge there is building useful and effective conversational content is very expensive, it's very time consuming, and not very good up to a point, right? You have an initial kind of turn taking, 2 turns, you get something. The deeper you go, you know this better than me, but the deeper you go, the more it breaks. That shifted 18 months ago or so, and the world has changed for us, and that's the first thing that really surprised me, that putting the first kind of version of ChatGPT plugging that into one of our digital people for the first time was like a real light bulb moment, because suddenly we have a face that people would trust and people react to, and the expectation of the conversation was high, that we would always have that drop off with users up to that point. As soon as ChatGPT arrived, we had engagement, and you had turn taking was easier. Conversation flow it may have not been true, it may have hallucinated, but there was a conversational flow that, looking at users and observational studies of interacting with digital avatars, you can see suddenly there's banter, suddenly there's responsiveness. Still challenges with interruptions and hallucinations, as we mentioned, but and as we've seen recently, interruption is a big piece of what the guys at OpenAI are trying to fix. And we're also doing that work internally, and that feels like the biggest challenge for us to create kind of product market fit in this space. that's kind of one of the main areas that we're looking at tackling, because once you've got that conversational flow connected to a very realistic empathetic experience, you can start playing with some very interesting use cases, which is the second real big surprise for me. We had a kind of big turning point in the business recently. Once Studio was out and available, and starting to see different people experiment and play with it, because the affordability's gone down and the access is increased. We had a chap on YouTube, a Korean influencer, who built a language practice buddy on the platform. So not someone to teach you how to speak English, but just a one-to-one practice partner, so that you can then go to your digital practice partner and practice your English. And that was a massive light bulb moment, because that's that non-judgmental experience, right? That's kind of that opportunity for you to use this tool to practice something and hear yourself speak and hear yourself engage, and try and work through some of those potential questions that you're going to struggle on, without being judged, without being like feeling awkward, and just growing that capability. And that's shifted our perspective on opportunity. So that kind of personal coaching, personal engagement, kind of that development there is huge. I mean, to that point, prior to this conversation, I practiced with a digital avatar to kind of see what questions I'm going to be asked, create a version of you, kind of like see how it's going to go. And it works, right? Hence big challenge with interruption, and that was the driver for us to kind of get rid of try to tackle the latency issues and the interruption issues. But once you can get there, once you've sort of hit a value proposition for a user, and that's one of those, then things really do explode. And I think that, I'm sorry, I'm going on a little bit now. You asked the wrong question, but but that's kind of where I think you're going to start see, if you look at the language that's being used with Google and with OpenAI and Microsoft are presenting their assistants to customers, it's all about kind of what you want to learn, right? That's the domain. It's kind of learn what you'd like to do. How can we help you do something? That's that assistant piece. It's not, in that world, or that landscape seems really, really fertile place to explore.
Yeah, I mean, this takes me down different paths, right, in terms of where the use cases are. So one, as you explained, is, I could practice speaking a specific language without, having a human on the other side, and really, am I saying the right things, right? Like, and am I intonating, or am I pronouncing the words right? I can practice quite a bit. What other use cases do you see this being applied in? I mean, one, I think you've also mentioned the movie industry,
Yeah.
it brings me back to Star Wars, where they recreated Princess Leia, right? And after she passed, the actor had passed, we had to they had to recreate her for that last movie, which was, you could tell it was AI. You could, right?
Yeah.
But it was interesting for but it was very possibly unbelievable, right? So is it that? Is it in the movies? Are we talking about in the enterprise environment? What does that look like? And of course, we also talked about consumer use cases like your AI companion, right?
Uh-huh.
So, what's the breadth of use cases that you think that could be? These are things that we've all talked about for a while. I mean, the movie Her, right? The
Yes.
girlfriend that existed. I mean, this is totally in that context. But where else do you see this application going?
Yeah, it's interesting, and to the thing I find fascinating around with the movie Her, I I think it's, if you talk to the latest version of ChatGPT and ask her about, are you Scarlett Johansson? She's quite pithy in her response, that she's definitely not, like contractually, no, she's not, but she sounds a little bit like that. So it's
Yeah.
definitely life imitating art. I think it's kind of funny. I think I heard, I'm going to steal someone's quote. And I can't remember. I think actually I do know. It was a podcast I listened to. It's another podcast. Benedict talks a lot about kind of the future of technology, and he had a very interesting point that right now with AI, what we're doing is we're trying to fix kind of current workflows that we have today, rather than starting to explore what are the new workflows or new opportunities that it's going to open up for, right? So there's a lot of us kind of trying to take this technology and shove it into the gaps that we have in what we do. I think the next thing is that as we get more used to that and as we start seeing where these things go, we're going to start be less focused on the AI of things and more on the value of what it offers to us. Another colleague of mine, old colleague of mine, works at WhatsApp. He was talking recently about the fact that, you know, what they're doing is trying to work out how they can incorporate AI into their platform to their users, and that suddenly becomes, that's Main Street. I think we talk about kind of OpenAI being, you know, 100 million users or whatever it was. Oh, sorry, ChatGPT open, you know, 100 million users. You know, what's that? 3.5 billion, right? So that suddenly you've got all of that. You've got those people suddenly doing different use cases, and that's really value driven. You know, what are WhatsApp going to use it for? What do WhatsApp users need it in their marketplace? So that's kind of on a very high level. That's what excites me about the development of the technology today. For us, what that means for us on our platform, on the creation of avatars. You mentioned character AI, and that's a real big inspiration for me, that whole platform. I think that's very, very simple, like large, massive user base of young people who want to talk to something or someone or a celebrity, and they will pay for that and they'll go and engage. And it's really very good. You know, I practiced using the therapist on there, and, you know, I've had a bit of therapy in my time, and it's the best therapy I've ever had, right? It's really, really good. You know, so there's the comedy side. You can talk to Elon Musk, you can talk to Spider-Man, but there's that one-to-one engagement with a person of your choice, you've constructed, right? And that's just text with a little, and then potentially voice. Beyond that, our world of adding the face, I think I see an opportunity for, and I mean, and this has got a lot of legal ramifications and copywriting ramifications potentially, but we do a lot of work with celebrities. So we'll create, like recently created a reincarnated Marilyn, using that as a test bed to kind of get reactions from people. It's very interesting and very surprising, the kind of engagement, and it surprised me quite a lot, the level of engagement that we got with that through our test audience. And it just opened up kind of people wanting to, well, I want to upload a photo of somebody to create my own personal assistant, right? That market of, you know, I've got a photo of this person. I want an Amy Winehouse. Can I just upload a photo of Amy Winehouse? Can I upload a photo of Prince? Can I do that? And then can I have my own Prince, my own thing? That I feel is ripe for opportunity, but also, you know, challenges, you know, massive challenges. But I do think that's where things will be going. You know, I mean, ultimately, if you think about it, there's not a lot that's going to stop someone from who's very good using, you know, CGI tools or modeling tools to create a face that looks like somebody, right? You know, like if they can model, you know, you see it on all of the marketplaces. Now, taking that model that they've created of a dead celebrity with no rights, plugging that into a conversational platform of some kind, using an interactive platform like ours at some point, those gaps are very small between those two things. So we're not too far from seeing a plethora of, you know, digital avatars that people have created to be their personal thing, to do whatever they want with it. And I think that's super exciting.
That, and, you know, right, if you could feed all of the digital interactions and the foot used to train a model and create an avatar of them,
Exactly.
that you could interact with, and specifically for grieving, you know, loved ones. This is questionable, right? Some people may question the ethics of that, but at the same time, you know, if you are willing, then you could actually opt into it, right? When I pass, or if I do pass, like this is what could happen. I think that's fascinating, creepy, but also fascinating in some ways.
Yeah, so I think the thing that I find fascinating about that as well, and I think that we do jump into this world of, we think about the potential sort of kind of end state of a super realistic version of a digital person, of a dead loved one or someone who's no longer with
Mhm.
us, and even someone who's still around and you're not no longer with. But the
Right.
limitations of the technology are always going to be so that you are aware that it's not real. There's not going to be
Mm.
that possibility of you having to be able to mistake that version of that loved one for a real person. You won't be able to put it on the phone, not in our kind of lifetime anyway. You won't be able to put it on the phone and pretend it's somebody else, right? It's always going to be conversational AI. It's always going to feel like CGI. There's always going to be that level of uncanny valleyness that will give it away. Humans are very good at perception in that space. So I think those areas are not the ones that I would be massively concerned. And the deep fake space, I think, is more challenging because of the implications of that. But this personal point feels less risky for me anyway. But maybe that's me being a bit naive.
This also raises some ethical sort of guardrails, and I would love to know how you think about it. I don't know if you heard this case of this man in Belgium who was interacting with a therapist bot and ultimately ended up committing suicide, and his spouse, alleges that, that the bot encouraged him to commit suicide. Now, he was, depressed to begin with, or had some
Yeah.
mental health issues that he was struggling with. Um, and he was in a vulnerable state, right?
Mhm.
And the bot was supposed to be a therapist, and I think it was a company called Chai, from where the bot came. How do you think about that, right? As you create these machines, is this something that you're worried about, and what guardrails do you put in place to, protect consumers from such untoward sort of interactions?
Yeah, it's a good one, and it's a challenge, and I think part of the way that we're trying to deal with it is we're trying to find the appropriate use cases, right? Anywhere, that to me, I think, we've had people who've approached us that they want to make therapists or they want to make, medical assistance or advice, and it's not that this isn't. I don't think this is the technology for that space. I think particularly in therapy. I mean, as we mentioned therapy before, there's plenty of people who work in therapy that aren't qualified to and have different levels, and there's services that are available that may not be the best level of service that you can get as things are becoming digitized. So I think the guardrails should be like industry wide, if you know what I mean. So it's a case of you
Mm-hmm.
can't for whenever technology comes into play, whether that's just the making it easier for you to connect with a medical practitioner. They should still be a medical practitioner, right? They should still be qualified by the same levels of qualification as if you were going into a waiting room and seeing your doctor or seeing your surgeon or seeing your therapist. There's a barrier to entry that should maintain, and if technology can meet that, then that's a different conversation. But it can't fundamentally. It can't. And the hallucination issue, the guardrail challenges. I think it's something we need to avoid and need to maintain that level of duty of care basically in those industries that we've had up to this point.
I mean, and we are entering uncharted territories, right? So putting in a big, super cognizant of where this technology is being applied is going to be interesting to see what choices both makers of systems, like such ourselves, and consumers of these systems, absorb this technologies. I think we have to watch out, but hopefully we can avoid, other scenarios such as this. But maybe let's shift gears a little bit. You've been a product manager in the product space for all these various interesting roles and companies, and really at the forefront of some of these emerging technologies. How has your role as a product manager changed from the CD-ROM era to now the era of AI? Right, so it's quite a leap.
I think the one thing that I'm seeing now that is super exciting, particularly coming from a design background, is the ease, how much easier it is now to synthesize data and user research. That's a big one. The fact that you can have the work that would cost a lot of time and effort to synthesize user feedback or to trail through data or information, we can now synthesize that so much easier and so much faster, and so much more effectively, to be honest. And I think that if you have and I know people who work in that industry, particularly in the user research or the user insights business, and they love it. It really is making work that for those guys would take so much longer and be so hard to adapt and respond to questions from customers. The speed of delivery and the synthesis of that content is massive. That's kind of the first one, I think, for me, I'd say is pretty consistent. I think the one thing that is consistently hasn't changed is the challenge that you have dealing with innovators or people who believe they have all of the answers, and they know all of the things that they know about customers, and they know about an audience, and they know about a market or product market fit. And a lot of the time when you work with newly developed platforms or with very innovative founders, they're thinking 5-6 years in advance. The challenge that we have as product people is to sort of bring them back and start thinking, 3 to 6 months to 12 months. And actually, what does that, how do we get to that point? How do you get to that path? And that's super consistent and actually hasn't changed a great deal. It just becomes, we're now having to move faster as technology is developing and adapting. Those are the two off the top of my head. I probably could come up with some more, but I'll ask you the same question. What's your take? What's the change over the last sort of 10 years been for you?
Yeah, no, I agree. It's strategy meets execution. Ultimately, it's the frameworks and the principles of product development, product design don't necessarily change.
Yes, sir.
But it's really taking something visionary, to your point, and I think I concur and I repeat what you said, which is taking something visionary and then breaking it down into its component parts, and how do you build it back up to meet that vision, right? I think ultimately technology is a tool.
Yes.
And what we do with those tools to enact a certain outcome, right, isn't changing. I think agile development, I think, has more meaning now, given the technology is changing so fast, right? Like a year and a half ago, I think you've experienced this yourself with Soul Machines, where we were building NLP models, and now you have OpenAI that can just essentially take on that task for you. More and more, these capabilities can be lifted off the shelf. Now it's how do you package that into an experience that you think can be seen. I think that's a big challenge. And I was speaking to someone, building a voice-based application, and OpenAI's new voice interface basically took their business out. And so now they have to rebuild, and they have to question themselves, how are they going to now bring what they originally intended to life, but perhaps leveraging OpenAI now instead of building it their own. So it's that's where the biggest challenge is for me, right? Where democratization of AI has been what OpenAI has done, really has really brought to the imagination. And I think a lot of people are taking a page off of that book. I still think, though, there is a big difference between generative AI and classical AI models. And I can't believe I'm calling it classical. It was only until a year and a half ago that they were the state of the art. Not every application or every use case requires generative AI, and I think my fear is sometimes I'll be taking everything's if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? And then you just want to apply generative AI to everything, but that's not the case. I think people in the know need to know how to pick the right tools here again, right? And tools being whether it's a basic model which would serve the purpose, or do you need something as advanced as generative AI? So I think the principles haven't changed. I think the final piece, though, is I also find product managers have to get from the very get-go of design of an AI first product is to think through what are the negative use cases or outcomes of the model, right? As you're thinking now, like we do not want to apply this as a therapist. I don't think we're ready yet. I think it can have unintended consequences that are out of our control and can have pretty negative effects, right? So I think that thinking, as a product manager, 15 years ago, I didn't have to think about that. All I had to worry about was, making sure my QA team ran the tests appropriately so that the system didn't break, right?
Absolutely.
Now, It's you don't know what you don't know because you're leveraging a bunch of open source or third-party tools that you haven't really built from scratch, and then you're now leveraging it into your applications. You don't know where the gaps are or could be.
Totally, yeah, and that kind of ties in with the point I was going to make to your previous point, is that really the way that you kind of focus on the appropriate tool, the appropriate uses, is you still come back to the basics of that end user value, right? What are we trying to build, and how is this going to be successful for a user? Now, the tools can help us identify those opportunities, but they do also come with risk, as you say, and that kind of the guardrails around that is you have to do a lot more thinking around the what if this goes here, where does this go? Or in addition, you need to be more reactive. So when these things do blow up, because they will, and they do quickly, what do you do next, right? There's how do you adapt to that? How do you pedal back? Once something's out there, can you bring it back? Can you fix it? Do you just pivot? Do you change? A similar issue, with the chap that you mentioned around, their business being kind of completely wiped out by advances on that stuff's going to happen at the same rate. The faster that things advance, the bigger the chances that you're going to be left behind, and we face that with our industry as well. So you have to adapt and to the conditions of the market, whether that's someone's technology's changed and improved and affected your business, or something your business has done is affecting somebody's life. And you need to take accountability and responsibility for that, and as best you can.
Yeah, that's exactly it. What advice would you give to a product manager who probably has come from a traditional sort of product, right? How would they transition to being an AI first product manager?
It's a good question. I don't know. At this point, I think it's the same advice that I would give to be honest, I think it's the same advice that I would give to product managers or product people. Is really start with identifying the value, look for the value, be open to the changes that are around you, look for the tools, look for the noise, try to cut through the noise and see the source and see the value. But really, that would be it. I think those things haven't really changed, apart from adaptable and really accountable for your decisions quicker. The time has changed. This is very outdated product advice, but we really, for years you would have people putting off making decisions until quarterly planning or until the next sprint review, or I think that's changed. I think with all of this change, as product people, we need to be more adaptable and more responsibility, and take more responsibility for the decisions that we may have made, and identifying where things aren't working, and if they're not working, then change them, and change them fast, because time is, we don't have the time or the luxury that we may have had even a year ago. I think that's a massive change to the industry today. In the fast moving world of startups that we've both become accustomed to, it's getting faster. The cycles are getting faster, and I think that's the biggest piece of advice. You can't wait, I don't think, anymore. You need to move quickly.
Yeah, I think speed and agility is key. It always was. It just has become even more amplified, right? Now.
It's like now. It's not. You're not running a 400-meter race. That was still pretty fast. Now you're sprinting. Now everyone's sprinting, or you're an athlete on an indoor 60-meter race, right? It's full pelt. I think that's the change.
Exactly. This is fantastic. From you, reflecting on your career, what's the most important lesson you've learned about innovation and leadership in each one of these cycles of innovation that you've been through? What's remained true and consistent?
It's a good one. I think it really does, and I've said it a few times in the call. I would just say focusing on customer value, an end user need, and really focusing on that and try to deliver into that. It's very easy to get caught up in stakeholder management or ego management, or doing what's best for your team or what you think is best for your business. But the truth is always in the hands of the people who are using the thing that you're building. And that's the thing that you need to strive to, and get get that level of thinking into your organization as quickly as possible. I've wasted so many years where I haven't done that. I've waited for the opportunity. And really, you should be from day one trying to find the best way possible to get users into the mindset of your business.
Well said. I think that summarizes this entire conversation really well. Thank you so much, Darren. This has been a great conversation. Thank you. I didn't even notice the time passed, but we are on time. So this has been fantastic. Thank you for sharing all of that. And Darren, looking forward to just seeing Soul Machines grow and succeed, and looking forward to keeping in touch. Where should people find you? Where should they look for Soul Machines? How can they leverage the work that you're doing?
So soulmachines.com, come along and sign up for your free access to Digital DNA Studio, or Soul Machine Studio, as we've just recently rebranded it. And you can find me on LinkedIn as I think it's Darren PJ Wilson is the URL for LinkedIn. So reach out and be welcome. I'd love to have more conversations with anyone, any of the audience, or yourself, Karthik. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on board.
Thank you. Excellent. And just FYI to everyone, this is not Darren's avatar, but the real Darren joining us today on this episode. Thank you very much for making this fantastic, Darren.